Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today, I'm doing something a little different, something I've been meaning to do, something I've been wanting to do, something I've been putting off doing, which means it must be done. It's time to implement a few little changes I've been pondering for the Sales Podcast. I've got a ton of books. Many I've read, many I haven't read, many I've read a little bit, and to be more accountable, I'm going to start doing some book reviews. I still have some guests lined up, and we'll continue to bring on guests, probably bring on guests of the books that I review, and I've had many of them on already. And moving forward, though, I want to dive into more books and give you some feedback, some insight on these, kind of like an executive summary, if you will. Let you know which ones I think are worth your time, spending more time, energy, and your own money on, but then how you can apply the lessons from these books into your own business to grow your sales, to improve your marketing, to make more money, right? Which is why we are all here. Back on December 11th, I had Chris Hallberg on, former Marine, and he is part of the Traction team, the EOS Entrepreneur Operating System. And that's the book I'm going to review today by Gino Wickman, Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business. Now, this is one of the books that I was remiss in reading on time. I was in a mastermind for quite some time with Kim Walsh-Phillips. I had her on as a guest as well. Super smart marketer. She does a lot with social media marketing. She wrote a book on Instagram. She does the marketing for Dan Kennedy of GKIC fame, handling his social media. She had recommended this book. She's got a growing team, a growing business, and I bought the book, and I started it, didn't finish it. And man, I'm bummed I did not. I have since finished it. I actually went over it in December, took a lot of notes. And one of the reasons, part of my excuse, a small part of my excuse, but a legitimate part of my excuse for why I don't finish some books is that I'm a doer. So as I read something, if I read something that makes sense, something that highlights a critical point, a gap in my business, an opportunity, I'll put that book down and go fix it right then and there. I'll go apply what I've learned. And so I've done that many a times. I've done that in conferences. I've heard something I need to do and, just do it right there on my phone, on my laptop, go back to my room, knock it out. It's not education and knowledge that helps you, right? It's the application of that knowledge and that information. I see far too many people taking a bunch of notes, attending a bunch of conferences, and not applying. So this book, Traction, I've really spent a lot of time on it in this last month. I am following the recommendations in the book. I now have a 10-year plan. I need to make a 3-year plan. I have a 1-year plan. I have the beginnings of a 90-day plan. I've got my team reading this book so we can get on the same page. So I'm bringing all of this to bear on my own business right now, which is why I think it's a great place to start. I recommend you get the book. I recommend you apply what he covers in here, especially if you've got a bigger team. If you have 10 or 20 employees, if you have 50 or 100 employees, right? If you've got an executive team with divisions, you need to get this book, start applying what they teach. Maybe reach out to Chris, have him come and work with you. I'm happy to come. I'm not an expert in this per se, but I was reassured in a lot of ways as I read the recommendations, realized that I do a lot of right things, and I coach my own clients along a lot of these same principles. We'll get into the process. We'll get into, he mentions Jim Collins, Good to Great, getting the right people on the right seat on the bus, make sure the bus is going in the right direction. So I was happy to hear that, either through past experiences, past mentors, past courses, past books, I've been applying a lot of things that he recommends, but it's good to have this in one place. And it really is an excellent book. And of course, I'm not going to read the book. I'm not going to go through every single page. I probably won't even get to the end of it, even in a review. So I will link to it on the website. I am an Amazon affiliate. So if you visit the website, click on those links to the Amazon books that I recommend. Amazon will pay me a few nickels. It's a way to support the podcast. And the more people like you that listen and share and buy things like that you would buy anyway, when you buy it from me, it just helps me go farther, go wider, go deeper, and help more people without having to charge, without having to have you enroll in a separate course. Okay? So again, this book, so Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business, the EOS system, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, really is fundamental in how you grow your business. He talks about how so many businesses are firing on multiple cylinders with different silos. And I've seen this as an employee over the years. I've seen it as a consultant, especially when it comes to sales and marketing, how sales and marketing are rarely on the same page. Often they are at odds. Often they do not like one another. Often they have different metrics. They're using different systems even quite often. So what management or what marketing calls a lead, sales calls nothing, right? And I've seen it. I was with a startup years ago, and we were in Las Vegas, and I was talking to a prospect. So I was selling primarily to financial services and healthcare. Those are my two industries. And there was a prospect I'd actually spoken to, and we'd never met, though. And he walked up to the booth, and he had two people with him. And in the middle of the conversation, the marketing lady walked up and literally interrupted our conversation and scanned all three badges. Well, it turns out that the person I was speaking to, he was the CIO. The other two were his assistants. But marketing was paid, the MBO, Management by Objectives. Their objective was to get a bunch of names, was to scan as many badges as possible at this Las Vegas event. My goal, obviously as a salesperson, is to make more sales. Now, was it good to have the names of everybody at that company that was in attendance and visit the booth? Yes. But the marketing person didn't take the time to document who's who in the zoo. She just scanned names. Now, if I hadn't been there, if I hadn't understood who was who, to go back later into the database and annotate them and segment them properly, then I would have been making 3 calls to try to reach one person. So it literally would have tripled my work. Now imagine if this happens. Imagine if these people had come up one by one. Imagine the other people that had come up and I didn't know about. So, marketing says, hey, we got 300 names scanned. And sales says, there's only 100 valid names in there. So you can see how these different objectives is hurting your company. If the sales and marketing are not on the same page, and I'm just using this as an example because that's where I've spent the bulk of my career. Okay, but this applies to operations. It applies to finance. It applies to your HR, and he talks about all that in the book. But in my world, I've seen companies, and I see it every day, still, where either there's no system for sales or sales may be using something like Salesforce, but then marketing is using something like HubSpot or something else. They don't tie the two together. People are cutting and pasting names. The salespeople are doing double entry. It's just madness. You've got to have a single source of truth. I wrote a post recently on sales enablement, and that's kind of a new buzzword. It's certainly been working in the larger enterprises. It's finally moving down into the SMB space. But sales enablement is the process of getting salespeople the tools they need to quickly find the information that is needed to further the sale. Upwards of 73% of people are getting their information, doing their research before they ever speak to a salesperson, before they ever contact you. So marketing plays an important role in developing and nurturing that relationship from a visitor to a lead, to a suspect, to a warm, qualified lead. But then, so we have sales, or we have marketing automation, we have inbound marketing. Sales enablement is the process, the technology, the people, bringing all three together into a unified front so that the messaging is consistent and is congruent. That's a big word I've used for years. All of your marketing and sales efforts need to be congruent. Your ad must look like your landing page, so when people click, they know they're at the right place. And then your follow-up information, your drip sequences, your email, your text messages, your phone calls, your direct mail must be consistent and congruent. So sales enablement is a great example, a current example of what's happening in the world of sales and marketing, to have a single source, to have that one operating system. But you need to expand that to the rest of your business, into operations, into finance, into admin, into personnel. And this book, I think, does a great job of helping you bring this together. In the introduction, he opens right up in the second paragraph with, how can you elevate yourself to a position of true leadership? And, even if you're a solopreneur, you're leading. You're trying to get business. You're trying to be seen as a leader in your space. You must differentiate yourself. You must answer the question in the minds of the marketplace why people should do business with you. When they have all these other choices, you have local choices. You have people that can come in from outside of the area. If you do online type of work, then that can be outsourced literally around the globe. There's even physicians, there's MRIs and things like that being read by overseas doctors. So even healthcare, things like that are being outsourced. So there's competition everywhere. How are you being seen as the leader? Now, of course, if you have a business, if you have multiple employees, then how are you leading people in your company? So how can you eliminate all of your business-related frustrations? How can you have great employees at all levels? How can you have them share your vision? How can you have them communicate with each other? Because we all know every single issue, every conflict we've ever encountered, individually or seen even as nations, stems from miscommunication. So, I come from the military, and that's just an extension. War is just an extension of politics. It's an extension of communication. It's another form of communication, right? And so if everyone can communicate, if everyone's on the same page, if everyone is working from that sole source, that single source of truth, then you can have great communication. People can then solve their own problems. Another great thing the military taught me, anybody can complain. So don't come to me just complaining and whining. If you come to me with an issue, you better come to me with 2 recommendations to solve the issue. Otherwise, leave me alone. And how often have you seen it with your clients? As you grow, maybe you haven't been quite as responsive because you're just busy. And then your customers start to figure things out on their own. Of course, you want to be there for them, but we've all had scope creep. We've had a deal where we're helping a client and they almost become needy. You don't want needy clients. Ideally, you're empowering them. And then ideally, they're coming back to you to solve bigger and bigger issues instead of the same thing over and over again. And it's the same thing is true for your employees. I mentioned Dan Kennedy at the beginning. Dan Kennedy's recommendation as a business owner is to get lost, right? Stop hanging out there with this open door policy, leading and managing by, got a minute. Hey, boss, you got a minute? When you own a McDonald's franchise, the agreement says that you, the owner, are not allowed to be in the store. You have to work from home or a separate office. They have a system. They have a great system. And they don't need the owner, the entrepreneur tinkering with things. So what can you do to get lost? What can you do to help your people solve their own issues? Help them be accountable. It's not a bad thing. Whatever can be measured tends to get improved. And I think it was in this book. So like I said, I've been reading it over the past couple of weeks. I'm pretty sure he mentioned, the story of Charles Schwab working for Carnegie. I think it was Bethlehem Steel. It might have been U.S. Steel, or it might have become Bethlehem Steel. I forget. But they were having issues at one of the foundries with production. And they tried everything. And they couldn't increase production. And then finally, he was touring the plant, talking with the manager, and he asked them, what their production was for the day shift. And it was 6, so whatever, 6 tons, 6 whatever. So he took a piece of chalk and just wrote real big number 6. And then as the night crew came in, they said, "Hey, what's that?" And they said, that was the day shift's production. And so really, without any big meeting, without any plan, the night shift said, "Oh, okay, challenge accepted." They did 7, so they cross out the 6. Here's a 7. The day shift comes back, like, "Oh, what's this?" The 7. Next thing that production is up at 10, 15, 20, whatever. They grew tremendously just by having a little pride and keeping people accountable. So stop buttering people up. Stop creating safe places and whatever, and not, you're still worried about hurting people's feelings. Hold people accountable. Have a clear vision. Have a written down goal. Have clear leadership. Have people accept responsibility. Give them the authority to make decisions, and then turn everybody loose. And ultimately, that's what he gets after in this book. Okay, like he says, when you do this, your business will not only run seamlessly, but also have the potential to scale up as large as you see fit. So if you're like most entrepreneurs, you have one or more of the 5 common frustrations: lack of control. People, right? You're frustrated with your employees, customers, vendors, or partners. You can always say, "Yeah, my job is great, except for the customers." Well, hello. Profit. Simply put, there's not enough of it. The ceiling. Your growth has stopped. And the last, nothing's working. And I've seen that all the time. I've seen it in my own business. After 11 years now, I've gone through spurts. I've gone through growth. I've gone through decline, gone through frustration. I get it. So that's why this book really has resonated with me. Ultimately, and he mentions here, the things that he teaches is simple but not simplistic. Just like golf. Golf's very simple. Hit the ball with a square club face, right? Make sure the club face is square at impact. Make sure you are accelerating through the ball. And make sure you're hitting the ball with a descending blow. And that applies for your driver, you hit it pretty level. Your putter, you hit it pretty level. But you still hit it square and you hit it accelerating. So 2 out of your 14 clubs are 100%. The swing is 100% the same. Even your driver, the swing is the same. You're just not hitting it with a descending blow. So simple, right? But not simplistic. What happens if the ball is above your feet, below your feet? What happens if it's in the rough? What happens if it's laying in a divot? What happens if you're downhill or uphill? Also, do you want to hit the ball and have it roll? Do you want to have the ball hit and stick? Do you want to have the ball hit and back up? So there's all these different things that come into play. What's the wind like? Is it wet? So simple, but not simplistic. Nothing in this book is impossible. Nothing is hard or difficult to understand. It's very straightforward. That's why I'm a fan of it. Okay, but like he says, you are not your business. Your business is an entity in and of itself. Yes, you created it, but in order to find success, you have to turn it into a self-sustaining organism. That is key. Again, I mentioned McDonald's. It's a self-sustaining organism. They have turnover in the area of 300%. It's worked by a bunch of hormone-raging, pimply-faced teenagers, and yet they still keep selling billions and billions of burgers because they have a system. And so that is this entrepreneurial operating system that is taught in this book. He's very clear on who he helps, right? He's got a clear demographic. In the work I've done with HubSpot over the years, and even going back years, one of the books or series of books I'll get into is by Roy H. Williams, The Wizard of Ads. We were wireframing websites and creating, the ideal visitors and prospects years and years ago. Like I said, in HubSpot, we call it a buyer persona. He's very clear on his, and his overlaps closely with mine. I'm moving upstream, moving from the solopreneurs and super small businesses to the traditional small to mid-size, right? 2 million to 50 million in revenue is what he goes after. I'm doing similar. I'm approaching or targeting similar size companies. He's looking at 10 to 250 employees. I'd probably say I'm the same. Growth oriented, yes. I mean, who wants to work with somebody that's shrinking oriented? Willing to change, willing to be vulnerable. Amen. People ask me, who do I work with? And I've always rattled off things similar to that. But the key was always, is there chemistry? Do I like this person? Are you not desperate? I can't work with somebody that's desperate. Somebody's looking for a miracle. Okay, I'm not an alchemist. I can't turn lead into gold. I can take good performers and make them great. I can take great performers and help them expand even beyond maybe their wildest expectations. But if you're looking for a shoulder to cry on, I am not your guy. But still, he's very clear on who he works with, who he can help. You need to be clear on who you're going after. Okay, the goal is to reduce needless complexity in your business. Okay, identify and remove distractions, identify and troubleshooting problems, and keep you and your people engaged and focused on a single vision. That's from page 14 of the introduction. So, throughout this, the idea is to eliminate your symptomatic issues by solving the real ones. I've seen this in sales. I talk to people about this all the time. You have to get 3 or 4 or 5 levels deep to get to the root of things. Even something as simple as, hey, we want to grow sales, we want to increase revenue. Most people would say, well, yeah, duh. Everybody wants to increase revenues in business. But that's not true. There's a lot of people that are coasting. Maybe they're a sole source provider. Maybe they're just lazy. Maybe they're close to retirement, and they're just comfortable. But when people say, yeah, so again, something as fundamental as, yeah, I want to grow sales, I want to grow income. Why? Well, we want to grow. Why? And who's we? Does everyone agree that they want to grow? Does everyone agree on how they should grow? Maybe you want to grow physical locations. Maybe someone else in your company wants to grow different verticals and keep, say, to one location. Maybe you do a lot of hardware and they want to move into software or into services and consulting. So you've got to dig in and find the real reasons. What are the real motivators? Once you get to the truth, then you can begin solving the problems. Then you can begin applying systematic processes into the business to truly make it grow. It's so important. I have an asset, a free tool you can get, thesalesagenda.com. It's the agenda I have used since 2006, just before I got into starting the Sales Whisperer. I was still in corporate America, selling a high tech for a startup. And the sales agenda, it taught me how to take control of a sale, how to set a firm agenda on the phone, how to confirm it in writing in an email, how to then confirm it in person when the meeting started, so I could stay in control. One of the books we're going to review pretty soon is Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff. I had Oren on as a guest in the Sales Podcast as well. Super smart guy. Venture capitalist, raises a lot of money. He is super successful in a very competitive industry. But, he talks about framing. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we talk about framing, controlling the space, controlling the tempo. Okay, and with the sales agenda, the ultimate thing, when we begin, I say, hey, the purpose of our meeting is to see if there's a fit. That's number one. Do we even want to work together? So, he's reiterating here, solving the real issues. Is there a fit? Do we want to work together? Will you be open and honest with me? Because that's the second part of the sales agenda. So is there a fit? I have 2 ground rules. We're open and honest with each other, and either of us can end the conversation at any time for any reason. I'll let you read the other 5 or 6 points in the sales agenda. So thesalesagenda.com. Go get that thing. Okay. But he's talking about, again, he reiterates in the introduction, people keep telling him, hey, this stuff is simple. It is. What he recommends in this book, this entrepreneur operating system, is simple, but you got to do it. So at its core, he has 6 key principles, 6 processes. He's got them in obviously in the table of contents, but he mentions the vision component is where he starts. Do they see what you are saying? Answering the 8 questions and shared by all. Next is the people component. Are you surrounding yourself with good people? Right people, right seats. Jim Collins talked about that in Good to Great. I read that book, golly, I think 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. I was still in Austin. I remember reading that book. Great author, great research. Next is the data component, the safety in numbers. And he gives a scorecard, and he's a stickler, and I agree on this, in not having too much information. Now, you may have 100 or 200 metrics that you track as a company, but as a leader, you need to be tracking only a few, 5 to 15. They need to be at your fingertips, and then others in your company track other metrics. So, but you're talking about having a scorecard, things are measurable. And again, it's the old adage, if you can measure it, you can improve it. The data component is next. I'm sorry, I already read that one. So the issues component, right? Decide with an exclamation point. Talk about having an issues list and an issues solving track. Very important chapter. And he later on, he gets into, we'll get into the traction where he ends, about having important meetings. Having this issues list and this issue solving list is a key to running great meetings. And it's possible to run great meetings. Like you, I hate meetings because most of the meetings I attend and did attend as an employee, I wasn't in control of those internal meetings. And so they wandered, they meandered, they started late. They didn't end on time. They had no real clear purpose. You get people that would grandstand. You get others that would stonewall, not participate. But so having this issues list and an issue solving track is so critical and so simple in how he lays it out. The next is the process component, finding your way, documenting your core processes, and it's followed by all. Another free tool that I have, and I've had this for years, is called Process Before Login. If you go to the saleswhisperer.com/PBL, stands for Process Before Login, there's a video there and there's a PDF that helps you kind of map things out to determine your current or ideal process. I'm working with a friend of mine I've known for years. She's coming back to me. She's owned Infusionsoft in the past. She's considering buying it again. She says she wasn't using it. And I'm like, what do you want to do? Why do you think you want this? And she doesn't have a process documented. So I could have taken her money 2 days ago. She was ready. She was calling me twice. I had to text her, say, hey, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back in a little bit? I reached out and she's like, hey, I'm ready to start. I'm like, why? Why is this right for you? Go write this stuff down. Then let's review it. Then I'll help you pick the right tool, right? Before you log in to some technology thinking that's going to solve all your pain, have a process. When you have a process, then most any tool is going to help you, right? Even if you buy, a less than ideal tool. If you have a clear process, you know how to use it. The analogy I always use is if I gave Tiger Woods my wife's golf clubs and he gave me his, he would still beat me on the golf course. Yes, the tools matter, but how skilled of a practitioner are you with those tools? So process before login. He has a good process for swinging a golf club. So even if he has a club that's too short, has the wrong loft, whatever, he can adjust his swing. I forget who it was. Probably a bunch of guitarists, but it may have been like Van Halen or Eddie Van Halen, one of those guys talking about how a string popped. Might have been Jimi Hendrix. Said a string popped in the middle of a riff, and he just adjusted how he played and didn't miss a beat. Right? The guy, was so accomplished. It wasn't the tool. Yes, the tool helped, but even with missing a string, he could still hit the same chord, the same notes, because he knew how to work the tool, how to work the instrument. Okay, so what is the process? And then finally he wraps it up with, the traction component from Luftmensch to action. I'll let you go look up Luftmensch. That starts on page 163. But in there he talks about having rocks and a meeting pulse. The rocks are the big things, the 90-day plans. And I may flip ahead to the book, go look it up. But we've all heard the story. He tells the story of, as a professor, he has big rocks, he has gravel, he has sand, he has water. He says, okay, how do you get all of this into this glass or this big jar? And if you pour all the water in first, there's not room for everything else because you'll literally fill it up with water. And so the analogy is get the big rocks, the big things, put those in first. Those are the big things that you've got to get done, the big rocks that will move the company forward. Then as you tackle those, as you get those handled, put in the gravel, right? That's the smaller issues, but they're still important. And those fit in nicely in the grooves, in the openings of the big rocks. Then the sand fits in between the gravel. And of course, it's not totally airtight. So you pour the water in on top and it'll truly fill in all the gaps. And now you've got a full jar. And so that's what he means by rocks. What are the big things? And again, he's very adamant about having just a few things, because too many people get into issues where everything's a priority. If you look up the meaning of the word priority, you can only have one priority. Everything else is a sub-priority, right? Or it comes after the priority. Prior means first, right? What comes first? So he really stresses the need to only have a few, 3 to 7, only a handful of big rocks that you're going to move and address in a quarter, right? In a 90-day period. He's a big proponent of having off-site meetings each quarter. He's a big proponent of having annual meetings off-site and a couple of days for there. He recommends having a dinner, some entertainment, because there could be some heated debates, some hurt feelings, so make sure everybody's on the same team. But from there, from Luftmensch to action, so the rocks and then a meeting pulse, right? He recommends a weekly meeting. And he gives a recommendation on how to have this level 10 meeting. And after seeing how he structured it, I know that I can now have a level 10 meeting following this simple but not simplistic plan. So are you following a system, or are you just running around like a chicken with no head? The final 2 chapters are pulling it all together, the grand journey, and then getting started. So great book. I'll spend a little bit more time here going into some of the separate chapters. I've got highlights, underlined, so many places. This thing could go, who knows, hours long, but probably not. But I do want you to get a nice feel for this, for the book, and give you some insight and some motivation to get it and go apply what he's talking about. So with that, let's turn, shall we? You literally hear me turning the page, chapter 1, strengthening the 6 key components. Number 1, he gets into vision. Right? Do you have a compelling vision for your organization? And have you communicated that vision to your team? I mentioned it before. Is everyone rowing in the same direction? Do you have the right people in the right seats, on the right bus, going in the right direction? Focus. He mentions Al Ries, his book, Focus. The example, we've heard this before, but the sun provides the earth with billions of kilowatts of energy, yet if you stand in it for an hour, the worst is you'll get a little sunburn, or a lot of sunburn. On the other hand, a few watts of energy focused in one direction is all a laser beam needs to cut through diamonds. You've heard this all before, but you need to hear it again. I needed to hear it again. Focus, focus, focus. Eliminate the ancillary things. Eliminate the distractions. Eliminate all the great opportunities. And focus on the best opportunity for you, your people. So EOS cuts through the buzzwords such as A players, platinum, 100%ers, and superstars to provide a practical understanding of the 2 essential ingredients of any great team: right people, right seats. So we're saying it over and over again. Now, what he gets into that I really like and I'd never heard before is the GWC. Are you finding people that get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it? Once you incorporate GWC into the people analyzer, which is an important part of the book, you'll have a working tool that determines which people are the right ones and which people are in the right seats. So important. On the data, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but he only recommends a handful of metrics. The scorecard, it's that weekly report, only contains 5 to 15 high-level numbers. So you're not tracking your numbers because you're trying to track too many numbers. And because you're tracking too many numbers, it's overwhelming, so you don't track any. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Narrow it down. He helps you figure that out. That way, the key answers, right, the important things, the most important things for you in your department, you in your leadership role, the important ones will be at your fingertips. So, and then you empower each person in your organization to have their own metrics. So important. So key. I mentioned mentioned issues, but transparency is a big one that he gets into. And I've seen a lot of companies pay lip service to this. I see too many people, especially entrepreneurs, people that want to be called gurus. I think they're too transparent. They're trying too hard to be open. They're too open. I miss some of the stoics of the past. So, I mean, good grief. But as a company, as an organization, as a leadership team, you do need to be open and honest. You do need to be transparent. This gives you a big opportunity in your business, okay, to open this up, to be seen as trustworthy. That's going to ensure you get accurate information from your people who feel safe, right? Not a safe space, but a safe place, a safe organization to talk about issues, to bring up shortcomings, and provide recommendations on how to grow, okay? So this open and honest culture is important. Process, as we said before, it's greatly overlooked. It's a tremendous weakness in most businesses. And so due to lack of knowledge, this secret ingredient, he calls it, this secret ingredient in business is the most neglected of the 6 key components. I mentioned the process before. Log in, the saleswhisperer.com/PBL. What is your process? What do you want to have happen? What is currently happening? And what would you like to happen in an ideal world? Is it written down? I don't care if it's on a whiteboard. You take a picture of it. Chad Kuzner did that. A client of mine, he was on the Sales Podcast years ago. He owns a credit repair facility. He bought Infusionsoft from me. He came up, I think it's 32 different steps, various ways, different ways people came to him, different options. Did they get qualified? Is it pending? Blah, blah, blah. And so once he got clear in his mind what he wanted to make happen and automate, then I helped him automate it. But I don't know your business, right? The doctor doesn't know where you're in pain. You have to tell me where you're in pain. Then I can poke and prod and run tests and draw blood and figure out the source of that pain, what's causing it. But you've got to have this documented. So we talked about by deciding what the process is and training everyone to follow it, just like McDonald's, which I mentioned. They succeed because they have clear-cut processes. Go watch that movie, The Founder. I just watched that a couple months ago. It's about Ray Kroc, and it's good. The guy, he was a bit of a jerk, but he knew what he wanted. The McDonald's brothers were very smart. They created the process. That's how they were able to do so much business. If you don't know the story, in a nutshell, actually they were right here in San Bernardino, just up the road from where I live. I met my wife at a country bar in San Bernardino back in 1994. Got married in 1995. Never looked back. But they were in San Bernardino, and Ray Kroc was selling malt mixers, and he was struggling to sell one. And McDonald's, they had like 5. And then he's on the road. He gets a call from his secretary, calls him back, and they were ordering, 5 more or 8. I mean, some phenomenal number. And to Ray Kroc's credit, he said, "Yeah, I think we got this order wrong. Did you want 1? No, I want 5. You know what? Never mind. Make it 8." So again, this big number. And once he knew that was special, he got in his car and he drove down, right? And this is before the interstate system and fancy cars and cruise control and everything else, right? He had to hump it down there, and he did. And he met with them. He knew what he wanted. I think he was a little shady in how he got things done, but that's another story. But they sold so many shakes and hamburgers because they were keen on their process. Okay, so by deciding what the process is and training everyone to follow it, you will enhance your troubleshooting abilities, reduce your errors, improve efficiency, and increase your bottom line. So do you care enough to have a process and to document it and to lay it out for all the world to see and then find the errors and then streamline it, fix it, and do it again? In that movie, and I think it's a true story, the part about they got this big tall ladder so they could look down, and they brought their entire staff. They were going to redo the entire restaurant. And they went to a tennis court with chalk, and they measured everything, the size of the counters, and they choreographed the movement from taking an order to making the patties to they made their own little things to squirt out the condiments, right? So they could squirt like a little dab of ketchup on like 5 buns at once, and then someone else would hit the mayonnaise and the mustard. And so just super efficient. And they choreographed it. They timed it. They realized they could improve it. Boom, they had everybody go sit down. They erased it, started again, rearranged things. So they were that precise. And they were willing to gut their restaurant, rebuild, close for a while, rebuild, and start over. And, of course, the rest is history. And then he gets into the traction part, right? In the end, the most successful business leaders are the ones with traction. Like I mentioned before, it's not enough to have knowledge and information. You have to apply that knowledge and information and apply it correctly. Okay? They execute well, and they know how to bring focus, accountability, and discipline to their organization. And he continues, due to fear and lack of discipline, the traction component is typically most organizations' weakest link. A lot of times when I'm brought into a company, just holding them accountable, letting them know that they're on the right step, letting them know, hey, don't do that, do this, okay, and go full speed ahead. Just knowing they're heading in the right direction, they excel. And it just happens. It happens all the time. It happens in all areas of life. So bring somebody in to help you with that. He asks most of his clients, or, he says, how would you rate the accountability throughout your organization on a scale of 1 to 10? He says most clients give themselves around a 4. So we mentioned having the big rocks earlier. So what are your clear 90-day priorities? So that accountability is so important. And when you focus on the big things, the little things tend to take care of themselves, right? But you'll get better at identifying the big things and addressing them. Then you have more time for the smaller things. And he addresses that by having a meeting planner, running effective meetings, right? Keeping everyone focused, aligned, and in communication. This is the traction part. So this meeting pulse. Meetings are necessary and useful tools, but they have to be done right. That's why he has this level 10 meeting. Again, it's so good. He has free downloads throughout the book. So eosworldwide.com, and then and I've downloaded them all, and they are great tools. So page 9 is the first one, and I'll let you go through the book and see all the others. But the goal is to make progress every 90 days. I remember, it was 2001. My wife and I were living in Pflugerville, Texas. We just had our 3rd child. So the boys were born less than a year apart, and then our first daughter was born less than 2 years after that. So we had 3 kids under 3. And our good friends had done the Body for Life Challenge. And so they told us about it, and it was a 12-week challenge, right? Basically 90 days, a quarter is technically 13 weeks, but the Body for Life was 12 weeks, and it was eating right, 1 free day a week. It was every other day you did weights, every other day you did cardio, and we got tremendous results. I was probably in the best shape of my life. I was at the biggest I ever was. I think I was like at 241 pounds. I got down to 218, 219. I lost right around 22 pounds. So right around 218, 219. I mean, 6-pack abs. My wife lost the baby fat she wanted to lose. It was fantastic. But having that 90 days, like, okay, we can do anything for 90 days. And you know what? We've stuck with it rather well. I've continued eating along that path in my weightlifting. I followed that to a large degree, for the most part. Ever since, the last year or so, I barely touched the gym. I'm so dang sore from jiu-jitsu, but that still keeps me strong. And that I'm not doing in balance. I'm going way too much, if that's possible. But it's not possible. So that's why I go 5 to 6 days a week. And that's why I'm sore. But hey, I digress. So have your 90-day challenge. So, and I'll read this paragraph. It's important. He says, in summary, successful businesses operate with a crystal clear vision that is shared by everyone. They have the right people in the right seats. They have a pulse on their operations by watching and managing a handful of numbers on a weekly basis. They identify and solve issues promptly in an open and honest environment. They document their processes and ensure that they are followed by everyone. They establish priorities for each employee and ensure that a high level of trust, communication, and accountability exists on each team. So you got to get after it. Okay, understand what's holding you back, and then he gets into the value of letting go of the vine. Getting into it, he's at the organizational checkup. It's 20 questions. You rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. You grade yourself. I scored rather poorly, and I guess most people do. That's why this book is so important. But in letting go of the vine, it's the old adage, you can't get to second base with your foot still on first. So I'll let you read the story, but most of us, like he says, are frustrated, tired, unwilling to take on any more risk. The truth is that before you can grow, you'll need to take a leap of faith. So are you willing to get the book? Are you willing to apply it? Are you willing to take this leap of faith? You have 3 choices. You can live with it, leave it, or change it. So what are you doing in your business? Change is scary, right? We can all admit to that. You've got to build a true leadership team. It means you have to have good people. It means you have to be a good leader. You have to let others take control of areas, right? You have to delegate, but you have to decide what it is you want to do. Okay? You can't do everything. So figure out what it is you want to give away. And you need to determine, where are you best and brightest? What's the best use of your skill set and your passions, your energy? He mentions Patrick Lencioni, his book, Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, the 4 disciplines at the heart of making any organization world-class. I have not read that, but it sounds rather interesting. Once you take responsibility for a problem, you can help to solve it. But you've got to have a united front with your team. Now, hitting a ceiling is inevitable. I certainly have seen this throughout my life. Certainly, I remember weightlifting way back in the day, and even as an adult, when I had goals, it's very common to plateau. And then if you go for a new best, whatever, let's say you're trying to bench press 225 pounds, and you struggle, you only get 205, 215, 220. And you don't get 225. All of a sudden you get 230, 235, 240, a lot more, a big jump. And that's what happens. But, are you willing to stay the course, to keep plodding along, doing what it takes to grow? And I'm seeing this now in this last year in jiu-jitsu. Some days you feel like you're just stagnated. Some weeks you feel like you've just stagnated. And then you beat somebody like you've never beaten, and you beat them bad, or you beat them easily. And you realize, okay, I was learning. It's like that story with the jar, right? I put the big rocks in, I can put the gravel in, and then I put some sand in. Okay, here's the water. Bam. Now my skill set is full. It's well-rounded. Now I can handle what comes my way. And so you can't always see the roots growing, right? So you gotta trust it. But it's normal to grow in spurts. That's why he recommends that having that 90-day window, the goals, and having a 1-year, 3-year, 10-year. So, because we can all do anything, for 90 days. But hey, growth is your only option, as he says on page 18. Focus on internal growth, all right, before you think about external growth. Get the back of the house, right, in order. When you're talking about restaurants, you get the front of the house, back of the house. Get the back of the house in order. So your leaders, page 19, you have to be able to simplify, delegate, predict, systemize, and structure. So to the degree that you and your team apply these 5 abilities, you will grow to the next level. So simplify, keep it simple, stupid. He mentions Dan Sullivan, the creator of Strategic Coach. I've heard him speak many times. Great guy. But he says, no further progress and growth is possible for an organization until a new state of simplicity is created. Less is more. I think it's BMW talks about less but better. For the longest time, McDonald's, they didn't sell chicken. They didn't sell anything other than, burgers, fries, soft drinks, and I think it was only Coca-Cola, right? And shakes. That was it. Now, of course, over the years, they've expanded. Now they sell more chicken than Kentucky Fried Chicken. But that was only after they were firmly established. In-N-Out, to this day, they're a staple here in Southern California. But, there's no chicken burgers there. You don't get a salad. You get burgers. You get a double-double. They have some off-menu things. You can get a 4x4. You can get your French fries animal style. But that's it. So similar to McDonald's. Hamburgers, French fries, soft drinks, shakes. And no one could argue that they're not doing well. So keep it simple. Delegate and elevate. You can't do it all. Your job as the leader, you need to be the visionary, and then get good people and turn them loose. Get out of their way. I remember in the military, it was our job as officers to keep, crap rolls downhill, right? But our job was to minimize the crap that rolled downhill onto our people. If it didn't help the cause. If an order came down, we had to execute it, but they didn't have to know all the details all the time. I had to filter it. I had to protect my people, encourage them, delegate, empower, let them thrive. And then I would take the heat. If they were following my instructions and things didn't work out right, I took the heat. So I sheltered them from both, right? So turn your people loose and let them go. Talking about predictions, long-term and short-term, he gets into the long-term. He's talking about is things that are 90 days and beyond. That's what he considers long-term. And, I mentioned he gets into a 10-year and a 3-year picture. So then also a 1 year. Your leadership team, he says, has to climb the tree more often than others. So he's talking about getting up and looking around, getting out of the weeds, seeing the vision, understand where things are going. Have that long view, because when your why is big enough, when your goal is big enough, the little things that creep up every hour, every day, they're not going to trip you up. They're not going to prevent you from hitting the goal. So, get good at taking the long view, get good at working on the business. The short-term prediction now, that's what he's talking about. That's the immediate future. That's your daily and weekly activities. And I've seen this far too many times. People are great with their vision boards and manifesting. And then they don't do daily and weekly what needs to get done to make that happen. This whole law of attraction, smoke and mirror stuff. If I just think about it and want it bad enough, it'll just manifest itself. It'll just pop up in my driveway. No, it won't. So systematize. I've been a fanatic about this my whole life. I've got a blog post on, I'll have to look it up, like ways to get more done with your iPhone, grow your sales with your iPhone. But I have short codes for everything. I teach people this all the time, just little things. And I've told, 9.5 years I've worked with Infusionsoft and working with small businesses, going on 4 years now with HubSpot. And I tell people, look at what you do 2 or 3 times a day or 4 or 5 times a week and figure out a way to, at a minimum, systematize it and ideally automate it. So writing long words like entrepreneur, easy to misspell. Infusionsoft, Entreport, HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, my calendar, right? My calendar is a long URL. I can't remember it. I'm an affiliate of ActiveCampaign, Entreport, all these other companies. And so I have long URLs for them. So if I'm doing a post, if I'm emailing somebody, I can just quickly, I have links to schedule a guest for the sales podcast. I have links and short codes for the CRM Sushi podcast, links to my calendar, short codes for my phone, short codes for my address, short codes for my entire bio. People, they want me to speak. I'm interviewed. I did an interview today with John Lee Dumas for the Entrepreneur on Fire. Hey, send me your bio. If I type out West bio, bam, it sends my entire bio. Super fast, right then and there. So do you have systems in place to streamline things? Most people don't. You're just doing the same things over and over again. And it's crazy. It's madness. You can't scale if you're busy correcting the word entrepreneur when you type it, 18 times, 35 times a day in a blog or an email or whatever. So look at what you do 2 or 3 times a day, 4 or 5 times a week. Have a process for it and preferably automate it. So, this is your company's way of doing business. Like he says, have a process, give it a name. So the Sales Whisperer way, the McDonald's way. And so and when you and your staff agree on that, then you will simplify, you'll apply technology to document and fine-tune those core processes. Earlier I mentioned, sales enablement, process, content, people. How do you bring sales and marketing together to enable sales? After contact has been made, right? After that prospect has raised their hands, identified themselves, and wishes to engage. All right. And then finally, a structure. When you have this structure, right, your company is going to be organized in a way that reduces complexity and creates accountability. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. Too many companies, they're either too loose or non-existent when it comes to structure. Okay, you have structures that are governed by your ego, by personality, by fear. When you learn how to use the accountability chart in this book, you'll simplify, you'll delegate, you'll predict, you'll systematize, and you'll have structure. And along with that, he concludes this chapter with, you can only run your business on one operating system. You can't have sales, marketing, operations, everybody singing, dancing to the beat of their own drummer. You have to have one abiding vision, one voice, one culture, and one operating system. You got to get everybody working the same. You must be open-minded, growth-oriented, and vulnerable. So that's an important word I don't think we've mentioned yet. Are you willing to have others on your team or outsiders like me come in and find the gaps and expose them, right? And not for the purpose of shaming you, but, when you find the problem, then you can fix it. So he quotes the late Dr. David Viscott, author of Risking, says, if you cannot risk, you cannot grow. If you cannot grow, you cannot become your best. If you cannot become your best, you cannot be happy. If you cannot be happy, what else matters? So with that in mind, let's start with where all traction starts, your vision. All right. Then he gets into the chapter 1 or chapter 3, which is the first component he gets to is the vision component. So I think you've got a good understanding, a good insight on where this is going. I could literally spend days on this book, telling stories and the nuances. But get this book, get clear, rate yourself, turn to page 10, go through the organizational checkup and be honest. Take your time going through, and, this is important if you have a very small team like I do. This is important if you have a big team. I'd say it's critical if you have a big team, but even running a small, lean team like me, this thing is making an impact. I am changing how I'm doing business. I'm more optimistic about where I'm taking my business. I finally have some clear goals, and I'm getting them refined daily, working on these things with my team. It's given me clarity on where my gaps are, who I really need on the team to fill in those gaps. So get clear on this vision. Work on getting the right people. Understand your data. Understand your issues. Understand and have a process for dealing with these issues. Run better meetings. Process before login. And then you'll get traction. So let me know what you think about this. Right now, I'm rereading Pitch Anything by Orrin Claff. Great dude. Like I said, I had him on the podcast. And man, it's amazing how many things, when not only do you reread, right, but time has gone by. I think that I first read his book in 2011, and I had him on as a guest several years ago. So, I've grown as a person. My business has changed. I've had different challenges, different successes. So being able to go back through and reread, I keep saying I'm doing this as much for me as for you. But, let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you'd like me to go into more detail as I get into these books. These could easily be 2 or 3 hour podcasts if I really get crazy on these. But the goal is not to read the entire book so you don't have to read it. The goal is to hit the high points and get you fired up to read it and apply it. All right. Everything I've ever done in business, going back to ninth grade with Mr. Bob Mabry in Ancient World History at St. Thomas High School in Houston, Texas, we had the Schaefer theory of relevancy. I've always been practical. Like, why are we doing this? What's the impact? Should we put this off and focus on more tangible, more critical things? That went back to doing test reviews back in ninth grade. So it's literally in my DNA. If things are inefficient, even at the house, my wife, sometimes she laughs at me, sometimes she gets mad at me, but I hate moving 2 and 3 and 5 things to get to one other thing. I'm like, can we reorganize this fridge? Can we clear this thing out? Can we, we have this lettuce crisper in this fruit little tray. Can we keep the vegetables and the fruit in these trays? I mean, it's just so, we've installed those shelves that pull out. Right? We put them in the cabinets. We put them in the pantry. I like efficiency. I like things to be smooth. And so, good thing in business, I will always have a job because there will always be things that need to be streamlined and smooth and enhanced. I want you getting fired up. I want to help narrow the focus for you so you know where to spend your time, your money, your energy. I think this book is a great place to start. Highly recommend it. I'm glad Kim Walsh-Phillips recommended it to me. I'm sorry it took me far too long to actually get after it, but now I am. So like I said, I'm going through Oren Klaff's book again. If you have some you'd recommend, if you have some you believe in that have really made an impact, shoot me a note. If you know the author, I'd be happy to read the book and then have them on as a supplement and complement to what I'm doing. And because it's all about you, right? My goal is to get better so I can help you get better. And you can help me get better by giving me your recommendations. Give me your feedback. I do listen. I do appreciate it. So please share this, reply, hit me up on Facebook, hit me up on the blog post in the comments. And, give me a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play. All that really does help. Let me know what you think of the new format. And now, go sell something.